There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. That's how Albert Camus opened the myth of Sisyphus. No warm up, no polite handshake, just straight into the abyss. Hey everyone, today I want to talk about the man who asked the bleakest question in philosophy and somehow answered it with sunshine. Albert Camus was supposed to be depressing. He wrote about absurdity, meaninglessness, death, plague, and guilt. But when you read him, you don't feel crushed. You feel strangely light. It's like he took the darkest and held it up to the Mediterranean light. Clear, dry, and honest. Camus was an outsider in every way. A poor kid from Algeria who never quite belonged in Paris. A philosopher who rejected being called a philosopher. A Nobel Prize winner who didn't believe in literary awards. And most of all, a man who didn't think life made any sense, but decided to live it beautifully anyway. In this video, I'll talk about Camus' life, his most important books, and some of the lessons that still matter, especially for people who have stopped pretending they have it all figured out. Whether you're standing on the edge of existential confusion or just tired of all the fake optimism, Camus might just be the strange friend you didn't know you needed. Let's get into it. Life. Albert Camus was born in 1913 in Mondovi, a small town in French Algeria. His father died a year later in World War I, and Camus grew up in poverty with his mother, who was illiterate, nearly deaf, and barely spoke. He came from silence, and maybe that's why he became obsessed with clarity, not intellectual noise, not empty philosophy, just truth, just words that meant something. He wasn't supposed to be a writer, or a thinker, or anything, really. He was just a kid with bad lungs and no money. Tuberculosis almost killed him as a teenager and kept him out of the military. But he was sharp, and he had teachers who saw something in him, especially one Louis Germain, who paid attention when no one else did. Camus later dedicated his Nobel Prize to that teacher. You don't forget the people who saw you when you were invisible. In his 20s, he joined a theater group in Algiers. He was poor. He acted, he cleaned, he wrote political essays for leftist newspapers. He got fired for being too critical of the French government. He started to understand something. He didn't belong. Not to France, not to Algeria, not to the left, not to the right. He was always in between. That sense of exile would follow him his whole life. Camus wasn't interested in taking sides. He wasn't interested in ideologies. He didn't want to be a Marxist or a revolutionary or a French intellectual sipping wine in Saint-Germain-des-Prés. He just wanted to see what he saw. What he saw was absurdity, a world that makes no sense, asking us to make something out of it anyway. In 1942, at 29, he published The Stranger and the Myth of Sisyphus, and that was it. He became a star, a thinker, a philosopher of the absurd. Except he hated that label. He once said, "I do not believe in philosophy, but in clarity." And maybe that is what sets him apart. Camus didn't write to impress. He didn't believe in complicated systems. He believed in the sun, the sea, his mother's silence, and the unbearable fact that none of it came with a manual. He died in a car crash in 1960, just 46 years old. A copy of The First Man, his unfinished autobiographical novel, was found in the wreck. The irony? He had a train ticket in his pocket. If he had taken the train instead of the car, he might have lived. Life, death, absurdity. That was Camus. Camus didn't write a lot, but what he wrote mattered. Every book felt like it came from somewhere deep, like it had clawed its way through his lungs, through his doubts, through his guilt, through his refusal to lie. There's a strange purity in his writing. He wasn't trying to build a new religion. He just wanted to tell the truth about being alive when life doesn't explain itself. Let's start with The Stranger. It's a small novel, barely 120 pages, but it packs a punch. The main character, Myoso, doesn't cry at his mother's funeral, and for the rest of the novel, the world punishes him for that indifference. Not because he did something wrong, though he does, but because he didn't follow the script. He didn't fake the feeling society demands. Camus isn't saying, don't care. He's asking, what does it mean to be honest in a world full of performances? Then there's The Myth of Sisyphus, a philosophical essay where Camus wrestles with the big question. If life is meaningless, why not just end it? He calls suicide the only truly serious philosophical problem, not exactly light reading. But Camus doesn't stay in the darkness. He says we must imagine Sisyphus, this guy, cursed to roll a boulder up a hill forever, as happy. Why? Because once you accept the absurd, once you stop asking the universe for meaning, you're free to make your own. That is not despair. That is liberation. Then came The Plague, a novel written during World War II, but set in a fictional Algerian town overtaken by, well, a plague. It's not about disease. Not really. It's about resistance, about decency, about choosing to help others even when there's no reward, no heaven, no applause, just you and your decision to not let people die alone. And then The Fall, maybe his darkest work. A confession from a man who used to think he was good, noble, generous. Until one night, he hears a woman jump into the river and he doesn't move, he doesn't help, and that silence haunts him forever. Camus is brutal here. He's saying the biggest lies we tell are the ones we tell ourselves. Camus was obsessed with moral clarity, but he didn't moralize. He never preached. He just kept digging, kept writing, trying to be honest in a world that punishes honesty. He never called himself an existentialist. That was Sartre's club. Camus rejected that label, maybe because he believed that existence is one thing, but decency is another. He said no to systems, but yes to compassion. He wasn't about despair. He was about dignity. Lessons from Camus. Lesson 1. Absurdity is not the enemy. Denial is. Camus didn't wake up every morning crying over the absurd. He just acknowledged it. Life doesn't make sense. Bad people succeed. Good people suffer. Nothing is guaranteed. But pretending, does it all make sense? That is the real lie. Once you stop expecting answers, you're free to start living. As Camus puts it, the absurd man is he who is aware of his confrontation and lives in it. Lesson 2. Refuse to lie, even to yourself. Camus had this almost sacred commitment to honesty. Not just factual honesty, but emotional honesty. If something hurts, say it hurts. If the world feels empty, don't fill it with fake meaning. He once said, a man is more a man through the things he keeps to himself than through those he says. But that silence shouldn't be a mask. It should be a mirror. Lesson 3. Being alive is not enough. You have to choose how to live. He believed freedom is not just about doing what you want, but choosing how to respond to life. In The Myth of Sisyphus, Sisyphus keeps pushing the rock, not because it's hopeful, but because it's his rebellion. We don't control the universe, but we can control how we carry our burden. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. Camus says, it's not about winning, it's about pushing. Lesson 4. There is no love of life without despair of life. That is straight from Camus. He understood that the deeper you despair, the deeper your capacity for love. It's because you know how fragile everything is. You've stared into the void and you still want to laugh, to kiss, to listen to music, to sit in the sun with a coffee. That's not weakness. That's his strength. Lesson 5. Rebellion doesn't need a cause. It is the cause. Camus, the rebel, isn't about revolution in the political sense. It's about saying no when everyone else is silent. It's about choosing justice when injustice is easier. It's not about burning the world down. It's about standing your ground, even if no one claps. His rebellion wasn't angry, it was human. Lesson 6. Happiness is not a destination, it's defiance. Camus didn't think happiness was about being cheerful or successful. For him, it was about saying, I see the pain, I see the chaos, but I still choose to be here. That is joy, not because of life's perfection, but in spite of it. He wrote, in the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. That line alone is enough to carry you through a hard week. Lesson 7. Don't look for heroes. Become one, quietly. Camus didn't believe in saviors. In The Plague, there is no one heroic figure, just ordinary people doing what they can. The doctor, the journalist, the town clerk, they all suffer, but they still show up. They still help. That is Camus' idea of greatness. Not grand gestures, but persistent decency. Lesson 8. Silence is not absence, it's invitation. One of Camus' most haunting ideas is that the universe is silent. It doesn't answer our prayers. It doesn't explain itself. But that silence isn't hostile, it's just there. And in that space, we get to write our own story. If there's no script, that means you're the writer. Lesson 9. You don't need hope to begin. This might be Camus' most radical lesson. Most philosophies tell us to hope. Camus says, forget hope. Act anyway. Don't wait for things to get better. Don't wait for clarity. Just begin. Show up. Be kind. Love. Create. Not because it will fix everything, but because it's the only thing that makes being here worthwhile. Camus reminds us that we don't get to choose the world we're born into, but we do get to choose how we stand in it. He wasn't trying to save us. He wasn't handing out meaning like candy. He just looked life straight in the face, without flinching, without fantasy, and said, this is it, and that is enough. He didn't write to make us feel better. He wrote so we could feel more alive. His heroes weren't winners. They were people who kept showing up, fully aware that the game was rigged, that the universe doesn't owe us anything, but who still showed up anyway, still did their job, still lit a cigarette and said, all right, let's go. Maybe that's what made Camus so timeless. He doesn't promise escape. He offers presence. A kind of lucid honesty that doesn't fix the absurd, but helps you live through it, with your eyes open, your feet on the ground, and maybe even a little defiance in your step. So, if you've ever felt like none of this makes sense, if you've stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m. wondering what the point is, you're not alone. Camus was right there with you, and he would probably tell you, the point isn't out there. It's in how you carry yourself through the senselessness. That quiet rebellion, that refusal to give up, that is what makes you human. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough.